The blood on her torn dress told half the story, but the terror in her eyes revealed everything else as she stumbled through the darkness toward the only light for miles around in the Montana Territory wilderness. Molly Richardson had been running for 3 days straight, her feet blistered and bleeding. Her lungs burning with each ragged breath she drew into her chest as she approached the ranch house that sat nestled in the valley below the sprawling mountains. Behind her, somewhere in that vast emptiness, the men who had destroyed everything she loved were hunting her like an animal, and she knew that if they found her, death would be a mercy compared to what they intended. The ranch house glowed warm and inviting against the cold September night of 1878, smoke curling from its stone chimney into the star-filled sky above. Molly's legs nearly gave out as she reached the wooden steps leading to the front porch, but desperation drove her forward. Her trembling fist connected with the heavy oak door once, twice, 3 times before her strength finally abandoned her completely. She collapsed against the doorframe, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face, mixing with the blood from a cut above her eyebrow that she had received when she dove through a window to escape the burning building that had once been her family's home. The door swung open so suddenly that Molly nearly fell inside. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground, steadying her with a gentleness that seemed at odds with their obvious strength. She looked up through her tears into the face of a man who appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of storm clouds that widened with concern as he took in her battered appearance. "Please," Molly whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming and crying and 3 days of barely any water. "Please help me. They killed my family. They are coming for me." The man did not hesitate. He pulled her fully inside and kicked the door shut with his boot, then guided her toward a chair near the fireplace. But Molly could not sit still, could not stop the sobs that racked her body as the reality of everything she had lost crashed over her like a wave. Her mother, her father, her younger brother Samuel, who was only 15 years old, all of them murdered by the gang of outlaws who had decided that the Richardson family's small homestead and the gold strike her father had found on their property belonged to them instead. The rancher stood before her, his hands hovering uncertainly for a moment before he reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with calloused thumbs. The gesture was so tender, so unexpectedly kind, that Molly felt something crack open inside her chest. "I am Kieran Vaughn," he said, his voice low and steady. "You are safe here. I promise you that no one is going to hurt you again, not while I have breath in my body." Molly wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to trust this stranger who looked at her with such fierce protectiveness in his eyes. But she had seen what Jackson Cole and his gang were capable of, had watched them laugh as they set fire to her home with her family still inside. She had only escaped because her father had shoved her out the back door seconds before a bullet found his heart. "You do not understand," she said, gripping Kieran's forearms with surprising strength despite her exhausted state. "They are dangerous. They will kill you too if you try to protect me." Jackson Cole does not leave witnesses. Something dark and dangerous flashed across Kieran's face at the mention of that name. His jaw tightened, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a hard edge that made Molly realize this man was far more than just a simple rancher trying to make a living in the Montana wilderness. "Jackson Cole," Kieran repeated slowly. "I know that name. He and his gang have been terrorizing homesteaders from here to Virginia City for the past 2 years. The law cannot seem to catch him because he moves too fast and has too many places to hide." "He found gold on our property," Molly explained, her words tumbling out in a rush now that she finally had someone to tell. My father filed a claim, did everything legal and proper, but Cole decided he wanted it for himself. He came 3 nights ago with 8 men. They demanded we sign over the deed. When my father refused, they just started shooting. Kieran guided her to the chair again, and this time Molly sat, too exhausted to remain standing any longer. He disappeared for a moment and returned with a wet cloth, kneeling before her to clean the blood from her face with careful, gentle movements that made her heart ache with how much they reminded her of her father's tenderness. "How old are you?" Kieran asked as he worked. 21, Molly answered. "I turned 21 last month. My mother made a cake even though we had little enough flour." Her voice broke on the last word and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Kieran set the cloth aside and took both of her hands in his. "Listen to me, Molly. I meant what I said. You are safe here, and I am going to make sure that Jackson Cole never makes you cry again. That is a promise, and I do not make promises lightly." There was something in his eyes, some deep well of determination and barely controlled anger, that made Molly believe him despite her fear. She nodded slowly, too tired to do anything else. Kieran stood and moved toward the kitchen area of the large open room that made up most of the ranch house's first floor. "When did you last eat?" he called over his shoulder. Molly had to think about it. Time had become strange during her desperate flight through the wilderness, days and nights blurring together. "I had some berries yesterday morning. I think it was yesterday. I am not certain." Kieran made a disapproving sound and began pulling items from his well-stocked pantry. Within minutes, the smell of bacon frying and coffee brewing filled the air, and despite everything, Molly felt her stomach growl with desperate hunger. She watched Kieran move around his kitchen with practiced efficiency, this tall man with broad shoulders and strong hands who had promised to protect her from monsters. "You live here alone?" she asked, her voice still raspy. "I do," Kieran replied, cracking eggs into a cast-iron skillet. "I have 3 ranch hands who work for me, but they have their own quarters about a quarter-mile from here. This land belonged to my father. He built this house with his own hands, raised me and my 2 sisters here after my mother died giving birth to the youngest. My father passed 2 years ago, left the ranch to me. My sisters both married and moved east." "I am sorry about your parents," Molly said softly. Kieran glanced at her over his shoulder and something warm flickered in those gray eyes. "And I am sorry about yours, more than you know. But talking about sorry does not fill an empty stomach. Come sit at the table." Molly pushed herself up from the chair, every muscle in her body screaming in protest. She had not realized how badly her feet hurt until she tried to walk across the room. She must have made some sound of pain because suddenly Kieran was there, his arm around her waist, supporting her weight as he guided her to a chair at the solid oak table. "You are injured worse than I thought," he said, frowning. "After you eat, I need to look at those feet." "I lost my shoes on the first day," Molly admitted. "I had to wade through a creek to throw off their dogs, and the current pulled them right off my feet." Kieran's expression grew even darker at the image her words conjured. He set a plate piled high with bacon, eggs, and thick slices of bread before her, then poured her a cup of coffee that smelled like heaven itself. Molly fell on the food with an intensity that might have embarrassed her under different circumstances, but Kieran did not seem to judge. He simply sat across from her with his own plate, eating more slowly while watching her with those thoughtful gray eyes. "Tell me about your family," he said after she had taken the edge off her hunger. "If you can bear it." Molly swallowed hard but found that she wanted to talk about them, wanted to keep their memory alive through her words. "My father was a good man, patient and kind, always singing old Irish songs while he worked." He taught me to read and write, which was rare for girls out here, but he said education was more valuable than gold. My mother could make a home out of nothing, could turn the simplest ingredients into a feast, could grow flowers in soil so hard you would swear nothing living could survive. And Samuel, my brother, he was gentle and funny and loved animals more than people sometimes. They sound like they were wonderful people, Kieran said. They were, Molly whispered. And now they are gone, and it is my fault. Kieran's hand shot across the table, covering hers before she could pull away. No, do not do that to yourself. Their deaths are on Jackson Cole's hands, not yours. You understand me. The only guilt belongs to him and his gang. But the gold was rightfully your family's. You did nothing wrong. Cole is the criminal here, not you, not your father for refusing to hand over what was legally his. Molly knew he was right, but the weight of grief and guilt sat heavy on her chest anyway. She finished her meal in silence, too emotionally drained to speak anymore. When she was done, Kieran cleared the dishes and then returned with a basin of warm water, a clean cloth, and what looked like medical supplies. "Let me see your feet," he said gently. Molly hesitated, then lifted her skirt just enough to reveal her torn and bloody feet. Kieran's expression tightened, but his hands remained infinitely gentle as he knelt before her and began cleaning away the dirt and dried blood. The warm water stung, but Molly bit her lip and endured it. She had survived worse in the past 3 days. "You are lucky these are not infected," Kieran murmured as he examined the deep cuts and blisters. "I am going to put some salve on them and bandage them up. You need to stay off them as much as possible for the next few days." "I cannot stay," Molly protested, even though the thought of running any more made her want to weep. "If Cole finds me here, he will kill you." "Let him try," Kieran said with a calmness that was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. He applied the salve with careful strokes, then wrapped her feet in clean white bandages. "I meant what I said before. No one is going to hurt you while I am alive to prevent it, and I am not an easy man to kill." "How can you be so certain?" Molly asked, searching his face for answers. Kieran sat back on his heels, meeting her gaze directly. "Before my father died and left me this ranch, I spent 5 years as a deputy marshal. I tracked down men like Jackson Cole for a living. I know how they think, how they operate, and I know how to stop them." This revelation shifted something in Molly's understanding of the man before her. The confidence, the careful way he moved, the hardness that occasionally flickered in his eyes, it all made sense now. "Why did you stop?" "My father got sick. He needed someone to run the ranch, and my sisters could not do it alone while also caring for him. So I came home, hung up my badge, picked up a rope and branding iron instead. But I have not forgotten how to use a gun, and I have not forgotten how to protect innocent people from men who think power and violence give them the right to take whatever they want." Molly felt tears threatening again, but these were different from before. These were tears of relief, of finding hope in the darkest moment of her life. This stranger, this rancher who had once been a lawman, was offering her something she had thought lost forever: safety. "Why are you doing this for me?" she whispered. "You do not even know me." Kieran stood, his hands resting on the arms of her chair, bringing his face level with hers. "Because it is the right thing to do. Because I have seen too many innocent people suffer at the hands of men like Cole. And because when you knocked on my door with tears streaming down your face, looking like you had been through hell itself, something in me decided that I would do whatever it takes to prevent more tears from ever falling again." The intensity in his voice, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, made Molly's breath catch in her throat. She barely knew this man, and yet she felt safer in his presence than she had felt anywhere since her family's murder. "Thank you," she managed to say, the words inadequate for the gratitude she felt. Kieran straightened, his expression softening slightly. "You need rest. I have a spare bedroom upstairs, clean sheets on the bed. Tomorrow we will figure out our next move, but tonight you sleep without fear." He helped her up the stairs, supporting most of her weight, and showed her to a simply furnished but comfortable room. The bed looked like paradise to Molly's exhausted body. Kieran lit the oil lamp on the bedside table, then paused in the doorway. "I will be right downstairs. If you need anything at all, you call out. I am a light sleeper." "Kieran," Molly said as he turned to leave. "Yes, I believe you, about keeping me safe. I do not know why, but I do." A small smile touched his lips, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges and revealing the good man beneath the tough exterior. "Good. Get some rest, Molly Richardson. Things will look better in the morning light." But as Molly lay in the comfortable bed, wearing a clean nightshirt that Kieran had given her that must have belonged to one of his sisters, she could not shake the feeling that Jackson Cole would not give up his hunt easily. The gold her father had found was worth too much, and Cole had already killed to keep his crime hidden. One more death would mean nothing to him. She must have dozed off despite her fears, because she woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of fresh coffee drifting up the stairs. For a blissful moment, Molly forgot where she was and why. Then reality crashed back down and she had to fight back tears again. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Molly, are you awake? I have breakfast ready." Molly sat up slowly, her body stiff and sore from her ordeal. "Yes. I will be down shortly." She found a pitcher and basin on the dresser, along with a bar of soap that smelled faintly of lavender. Molly washed her face and hands, wishing she could wash away the memories as easily as she washed away the dirt. The dress she had arrived in was ruined, torn and blood-stained, but she had nothing else to wear. She pulled it on anyway, trying not to look at the dark stains. When she limped down the stairs, moving carefully on her bandaged feet, she found Kieran at the stove again, his back to her. He had changed into fresh clothes, his dark hair slightly damp as if he had recently bathed. When he turned and saw her in her ruined dress, his expression tightened. "I should have thought of that last night. My youngest sister left some of her things behind when she moved. You are about the same size. After breakfast, we will find you something clean to wear." "You have done so much already," Molly protested, but Kieran waved off her objection. "Sit. Eat. Then we talk about what happens next." The meal was simple but filling. Pancakes with honey, bacon, and more of that excellent coffee. Molly ate with better manners than the night before, though she was still ravenous. As she ate, she watched Kieran, really seeing him for the first time in good light. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and those striking gray eyes that seemed to see everything. His hands were scarred and calloused from hard work, but they moved with a grace that spoke of careful control. This was a man who knew exactly what he was capable of, who carried himself with quiet confidence. "You are staring," Kieran said without looking up from his plate, but there was a hint of amusement in his voice. Molly felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I am sorry. I was just thinking about how lucky I was to find your ranch in the darkness. I had no idea where I was going, just following that light in your window like a beacon." "Not luck," Kieran said, finally meeting her eyes. "Providence, maybe. Fate bringing you to someone who could help instead of someone who might have turned you away or worse." "Do you believe in fate?" Molly asked curiously. Kieran considered the question. "I believe some things are meant to happen. I believe that sometimes people come into our lives at exactly the moment we need them, or they need us. Whether you call that fate or coincidence or God's plan, I do not know, but I am glad you found your way here." Something warm unfurled in Molly's chest at his words, something that felt dangerously close to hope. She looked down at her plate, suddenly shy. "So what happens now? Do we go to the law?" Kieran's expression darkened. "The nearest law is in Columbia, almost a full day's ride from here. The sheriff there is a good man, but he is one man with one deputy trying to keep peace in a rough mining town. By the time we got there and convinced him to form a posse, Cole could have disappeared into the mountains, or worse, could have tracked you here. No, I think we need a different approach." "What kind of approach?" Molly asked, though something in his tone made her nervous. "We make Cole come to us, but on our terms, not his. We set a trap." "That sounds dangerous." "It will be," Kieran admitted, "but running will not solve this. Cole will not stop hunting you as long as he thinks you are a threat to him. You saw what he did. You are the only witness to his crimes. He needs you dead to feel safe. So we give him what he wants. We let him think he can get to you. But when he comes, we will be ready." Molly shook her head, fear rising in her throat. "I cannot ask you to risk your life like that. You have already done more than enough just by giving me shelter. I will not be responsible for your death too." Kieran reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and strong. "You are not asking. I am offering. And I am not planning to die. I am planning to end Jackson Cole's reign of terror once and for all." "How can you be so calm about this?" Molly demanded, pulling her hand back. "You speak of it like you are planning to mend a fence, not face down a gang of killers." "Because fear will not help us," Kieran said simply. "Clear thinking and good planning will. I have faced down dangerous men before, Molly. I know what I am doing. But no buts. This is happening whether you agree or not. Cole will come. The only question is whether we are prepared when he does." Molly wanted to argue more, but she could see the determination in Kieran's eyes. This was a man who had made up his mind and would not be swayed. She sighed, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle over her again despite having just woken. "What do you need me to do?" "For now, rest and recover. I need to ride out to check on my cattle and talk to my ranch hands. I will tell them to keep their eyes open for any strangers. When I get back, we will talk more about the plan." "You are leaving me here alone." Molly could not keep the fear out of her voice. Kieran stood and walked to a cabinet near the fireplace. When he opened it, Molly saw several rifles and a shotgun secured inside. He pulled out a Winchester rifle and a small pistol, bringing both to the table. "You know how to use a gun?" he asked. "My father taught me to shoot. We needed to hunt for food sometimes." "Good." Kieran showed her the rifle, demonstrating how to load and fire it. "This stays with you while I am gone. The doors and windows are all locked. Do not open them for anyone, and I mean anyone except me. If someone tries to force their way in, you shoot first and ask questions later. Understand?" Molly nodded, taking the rifle from him. It was heavier than she expected, solid and deadly in her hands. The pistol he showed her how to tuck into the pocket of her dress for easier access. "I will be back before dark," Kieran promised. "If for some reason I am not, if something happens, you take the horse in the barn and ride hard for Columbia. The road is easy enough to follow even in the dark. Tell the sheriff everything. Tell him Kieran Vaughn sent you and that it is about Jackson Cole. He will protect you." "Nothing better happened to you," Molly said fiercely, surprising herself with the intensity of her emotion. "I have already lost everyone I loved. I cannot lose you too." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning that neither was quite ready to examine. Kieran's expression softened, and he reached out to brush a strand of hair back from Molly's face, his touch gentle. "I will be fine. I promise. I have been dealing with cattle and checking fences and dealing with ranch matters in this territory for 2 years now without incident. Today will be no different." But as Molly watched him ride away from the porch, sitting tall and straight in his saddle, she could not shake the feeling that everything had already changed. The moment she had knocked on his door, the moment he had promised to protect her, both of their lives had shifted onto a new path. Where that path led, she could not say, but she knew with absolute certainty that Kieran Vaughn had become important to her in a way that defied logic or reason. She spent the day exploring the ranch house, rifle always in reach. The home was comfortable and well-maintained, with touches here and there that spoke of a man who took pride in his space. There were books on a shelf near the fireplace, a mix of practical manuals about ranching and animal husbandry, alongside novels and poetry. A photograph on the mantel showed a younger Kieran with an older man who must have been his father and two girls who shared Kieran's dark hair and strong features. In the room where Kieran had told her his sisters had left clothes, Molly found a wardrobe full of dresses that looked barely worn. She chose a simple blue cotton dress that fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the waist and tight in the chest. It felt wonderful to be in clean clothes, to feel human again instead of like a hunted animal. She washed her ruined dress as best she could, hanging it outside to dry in the warm September sun. Then she made herself useful by tidying the kitchen and preparing the ingredients for supper, wanting to repay Kieran's kindness in whatever small way she could. The sun was beginning to sink toward the mountains when Molly heard hoofbeats approaching. She grabbed the rifle and moved to the window, peeking carefully around the curtain. Relief flooded through her when she recognized Kieran's tall form on his bay horse. But her relief turned to concern when she saw he was not alone. 3 men rode with him, and they were all armed. Molly's hands tightened on the rifle until Kieran's voice called out clearly, "Molly, it is all right. These are my ranch hands. I am bringing them to meet you." She set the rifle aside but kept it close as she unlocked the door. Kieran dismounted and approached the porch, his expression reassuring. "These are the men who work for me. I trust them completely, and I have told them about your situation. They have agreed to help us." The 3 men who followed Kieran up the porch steps were a varied group. The oldest looked to be in his 50s, weather beaten and bow-legged from years in the saddle. The second was perhaps 30, with bright red hair and an easy smile. The youngest could not have been more than 20, with the smooth face of someone still new to the hard life of a ranch hand. "Molly, this is Tom Garrett," Kieran gestured to the older man. "Henry O'Brien," the red-haired man tipped his hat, "and Sam Wheeler." The young one nodded shyly. "Pleased to meet you, miss," Tom said, his voice gravelly but kind. "Terrible sorry about what happened to your family. Kieran here told us the basics. We will do everything we can to help keep you safe." "And to put Jackson Cole in the ground where he belongs," Henry added, his jovial expression turning hard. "Thank you," Molly managed, overwhelmed by this show of support from strangers. "All of you. You do not have to risk yourselves for me." "Actually, we do," Sam spoke up, his voice younger but determined. "My sister was killed by Cole's gang 2 years ago when they raided the stage she was riding in. The law never caught them, never made them pay for it. If we can help stop them now, help make sure no one else loses family to those animals, then it is worth the risk." Molly felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different. These were tears of gratitude, of finding unexpected allies in this harsh territory. Kieran must have seen her emotional state because he gently ushered the men back toward their horses. "We will talk more tomorrow," he told them. "For tonight, just keep watch like we discussed. Any sign of strangers, you come get me immediately." After the ranch hands rode off, Kieran and Molly went back inside. The house felt even more comfortable now, like a haven against the dangers of the world beyond its walls. Molly showed Kieran the supper preparations she had made, and he looked genuinely pleased. "You did not have to do all this," he said. "I wanted to. I needed to do something useful instead of just sitting around being frightened." They worked together to finish the meal, moving around each other in the kitchen with surprising ease. Molly found herself acutely aware of Kieran's presence, of his warmth when he reached past her to grab something, of the sound of his voice when he asked her to pass him a plate. It was strange how quickly he had become familiar to her, how safe she felt in his company. Over supper, Kieran explained more of his plan. "We will spread the word that you are here. Quietly, carefully, but we will make sure it reaches the right ears. Men like Cole always have informants in towns, people who sell information for a few coins. Once he knows where you are, he will come." "And when he does?" Molly asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "When he does, we will be ready. I have already sent word to the sheriff in Columbia, told him what is happening, and asked him to come with deputies if he can. Even if he cannot make it in time, we will have enough firepower to handle Cole and his gang. How many men does he have? You said 8 when they attacked your family. He might have more, he might have less. Some might have moved on to other gangs, other opportunities. But we will prepare for the worst and hope for the best." After supper, Kieran insisted on checking Molly's feet again. She sat in the chair by the fireplace while he knelt before her, carefully unwrapping the bandages. His touch was gentle, professional, but Molly found her heart beating faster anyway. There was something intimate about the moment, about the way he cradled her foot in his large hands, the way his brow furrowed in concentration as he examined the healing cuts. "They look better," he pronounced. "The salve is working. You should be able to walk without pain in a few more days." "Thank you," Molly said softly. "For this, for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness." Kieran looked up at her, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "I do not want repayment. I want you safe. I want you to have a chance at a future instead of dying in the wilderness because some evil man decided your family's lives were worth less than gold." "Why do you care so much?" Molly whispered. "You barely know me." Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his hand still cradling her foot. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because when I opened my door and saw you standing there, tears streaming down your face, something in my chest broke open. You looked so lost, so terrified, and all I could think was that I would do anything, be anything, to take that fear away. I cannot explain it better than that. I just know that since you knocked on my door, you have become important to me in a way I did not expect." Molly reached down and covered his hands with hers. "You have become important to me too. I know it is strange, I know we just met, but I feel like I can trust you in a way I have never trusted anyone outside my family." "Then trust me now," Kieran said, rising to sit on the ottoman so they were at eye level. "Trust me to keep you safe. Trust me to see this through. Trust me to keep the promise I made when I wiped away your tears." "I do trust you," Molly said, and realized it was completely true. This man, this former lawman turned rancher, had become her protector, her ally, and something more that she was not quite ready to name yet. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Molly's feet healed quickly under Kieran's careful attention, and she grew stronger with good food and rest. She took over most of the cooking and household chores, needing the activity to keep her mind from dwelling on what was coming. Kieran spent his days working the ranch but never strayed far from the house, always within shouting distance if Molly needed him. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked. Kieran told her stories about his time as a deputy marshal, about tracking outlaws across 3 territories and bringing them to justice. Molly talked about her childhood, about growing up on a homestead, about her dreams of one day opening a school to teach children to read and write like her father had taught her. "You would make an excellent teacher," Kieran said one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "You have patience and kindness, and I have seen you reading my books. You are well educated for someone who grew up on a homestead." "My father believed education was the key to a better life," Molly said, smiling at the memory even though it hurt. "He used to say that a person who could read could go anywhere, do anything, because books could take you to worlds beyond what you saw with your eyes." "He sounds like he was a wise man." "He was. He would have liked you, I think. He always respected people who stood up for what was right, who protected those who could not protect themselves." Kieran reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. The gesture felt natural now, comfortable. They had been touching more over the past week, small, innocent contacts that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through Molly's body. A hand on her shoulder as Kieran passed behind her chair, her fingers brushing his as she handed him a cup of coffee. The way he sometimes tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when they talked. "I wish I could have met him," Kieran said quietly. "I wish I could have prevented what happened to your family. If I had known Cole was operating in this area, if I had still been wearing a badge, maybe I could have stopped him before." "Do not," Molly interrupted, squeezing his hand. "Do not take responsibility for what that monster did. You told me the same thing, remember? The guilt belongs to Cole, not to me, not to you, not to anyone except him and his gang." Kieran smiled slightly. "Using my own words against me. Because they are true." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell around them, neither wanting to break the peaceful moment. But peace, as they both knew, was a temporary thing in the Montana Territory in 1878. The word finally came 9 days after Molly had first knocked on Kieran's door. Henry rode up to the house at noon, his face grim. "Got news from town. Cole knows she is here." One of the merchants in Columbia heard some men asking questions about a girl who might have escaped Cole's raid on the Richardson homestead. Description matches Molly exactly. They were offering money for information on where she went. Kieran's expression hardened. "How long before he comes?" "Could be today, could be tomorrow, but he is coming, no doubt about that." "Right. Get Tom and Sam. Tell them to take positions like we discussed, and Henry, thank you." Henry tipped his hat and rode off at a gallop. Kieran turned to Molly, who had gone pale but remained steady. "Are you ready for this?" "No," Molly admitted. "But I do not think I ever will be, so we might as well get it over with." Kieran pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Over the past days they had grown physically comfortable with each other, but this embrace was different. This was Kieran offering comfort and strength, and Molly accepting it gratefully. She pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of leather and soap and something uniquely him. "I am not going to let anything happen to you," he murmured into her hair. "You know that, right?" "I know you will try," Molly said, "but promise me something, anything. If it comes down to a choice between your life and mine, you choose yours. Promise me, Kieran. I could not bear it if you died because of me." Kieran pulled back just enough to look down at her, his gray eyes fierce. "I cannot promise that. I will not promise that. But I will promise this. I will do everything in my power to make sure we both survive this. I will fight with everything I have to keep us both alive. Because I am not ready to let you go, Molly Richardson. Not now, possibly not ever." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and promise. Molly reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "When this is over," she whispered, "when Cole is dealt with and we are safe, we need to talk about what this is between us. About what it means." "When this is over," Kieran agreed, covering her hand with his. "But first, We survive. They spent the afternoon preparing. Kieran positioned his ranch hands strategically around the property where they could provide cover fire if needed. He made sure all the guns were loaded and ready, that there was ammunition within easy reach. He boarded up some of the windows to make the house more defensible, leaving only strategic openings to shoot from. Molly watched him work, admiring his efficiency and calm under pressure. This was the deputy marshal showing through, the man who had tracked dangerous criminals for years. He was in his element now, focused and determined. It made her feel safer even as her anxiety grew. As evening approached, they prepared a quick meal but neither ate much. Tension filled the air like an approaching storm. Tom came to the house just before sunset with news. Riders approaching from the east, at least 6 men, maybe more, moving slow like they are being careful. "That is them," Kieran said, his voice calm but his hand dropping to the gun at his hip. "Everyone to their positions. Remember, we want them close enough that they cannot escape, but not so close they can overwhelm us. Let me do the talking first. Only shoot if they start shooting." Tom nodded and hurried off. Kieran turned to Molly, who stood near the fireplace gripping her rifle with white-knuckled hands. "Stay away from the windows. If shooting starts, you get behind the furniture and stay down. Let me and the men handle this." "I can shoot," Molly protested. "I can help. I know you can. But I need you to stay alive more than I need another gun. Please, Molly, do this for me." She wanted to argue, but the plea in his eyes stopped her. She nodded reluctantly. "Be careful. Always am." Kieran checked his guns one more time, then surprised her by leaning down and pressing a quick, firm kiss to her forehead. "When this is over," he said again, then turned and strode out onto the porch. Molly moved to a spot where she could see out through a crack in the boarded window without being visible from outside. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. In the fading light, she could see riders approaching, 6 figures on horseback moving slowly up the path toward the ranch house. They stopped about 30 yards out, close enough to talk but far enough to retreat quickly if needed. The man in front was tall and thin, with a cruel face and cold eyes that Molly recognized even at this distance. "Jackson Vaughn," Cole called out, his voice carrying easily in the still evening air. "I hear you got something that belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you, Cole," Kieran replied, his voice calm and steady. "Just my ranch and my livestock. I suggest you turn around and ride back where you came from." "Now, we both know that is not going to happen. You got a girl in there, a girl who saw something she should not have seen. I just want to talk to her, that is all. No need for any trouble." "If you wanted to talk, you would not have brought 6 armed men with you," Kieran observed. "And we both know you have no intention of leaving her alive, so here is what is going to happen instead. You are going to turn around and ride away, and tomorrow I am going to make sure the sheriff knows exactly where to find you. You are done terrorizing homesteaders in this territory." Cole laughed, a harsh sound that made Molly's skin crawl. "You think you can stop me? You are just one man, Vaughn. Former deputy playing at rancher. You got no authority here, no right to interfere in my business. I have every right to protect an innocent woman from a murderer, and you are wrong about me being alone." As if on cue, Tom, Henry, and Sam appeared from their positions, rifles trained on Cole and his men. The outlaws shifted nervously, hands moving toward their weapons. "Easy now," Kieran said, his voice carrying a warning. "You are outnumbered and outgunned. I sent word to the sheriff in Columbia days ago. Even if you somehow manage to kill all of us, which you will not make it out of this territory alive. There is a posse already on its way. Your only chance is to surrender now and take your chances with a judge instead of a rope." "You are bluffing," Cole said, but Molly could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Are you willing to bet your life on that? For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension stretched so tight that Molly thought it might snap at any second. Then one of Cole's men, a young outlaw with more fear than sense, drew his gun. Everything exploded into chaos. The crack of gunfire shattered the evening quiet. Molly dropped behind the heavy oak table, her hands over her ears, rifle momentarily forgotten. She could hear shouting, more shots, the panicked whinnying of horses. Through the window crack, she saw Kieran dive behind a thick wooden pillar, his own gun now drawn and returning fire. The firefight was brief but intense. Cole's men were dangerous but undisciplined, shooting wildly. Kieran and his ranch hands were methodical, each shot carefully aimed. Within minutes, 3 of Cole's men were on the ground, either dead or wounded. Another 2 broke and ran, spurring their horses into the darkness. Cole himself took a bullet in the shoulder but managed to stay mounted, wheeling his horse around to follow his fleeing men. "Stop!" Kieran shouted, stepping out from cover with his gun trained on Cole's retreating back. "Jackson Cole, you are under arrest for murder and robbery. Stop now or I will shoot you down like the dog you are." But Cole kept riding, disappearing into the growing darkness. Kieran cursed and started toward his own horse, but Henry called out, "Let him go, boss. He is wounded bad, leaving a blood trail. He will not get far." Kieran hesitated, clearly torn between pursuit and staying to protect Molly. Molly made the decision for him by stepping out onto the porch. "He is right. You cannot chase him in the dark. You could ride into an ambush." Kieran turned to look at her, and Molly saw the frustration and worry in his face, but he holstered his gun and climbed the porch steps to her. "Are you hurt? Did any bullets come through?" "I am fine. The table protected me like you said." Molly looked past him to where Tom and Sam were checking the fallen outlaws. "Are they? 2 dead, 1 wounded but alive," Tom called back. "This one might make it if we get him to a doctor." "Tie him up and throw him in the wagon," Kieran ordered. "First thing tomorrow, we take him to Columbia along with the bodies. The sheriff can sort it out from there." As the ranch hands dealt with the aftermath of the fight, Kieran guided Molly back inside. His hands were shaking slightly now that the immediate danger had passed, and Molly realized he had been just as frightened as she was, just better at hiding it. "You were amazing," she said softly. "So calm, so in control." "I was terrified," Kieran admitted. "The whole time, all I could think was that if a stray bullet found you, if something happened to you because I brought this fight here, I would never forgive myself." Molly took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "You saved me. Again. You kept your promise. You prevented more tears from falling." "Cole got away," Kieran said bitterly. "But his gang is broken and he is wounded. You said yourself he left a blood trail. The sheriff can track him down. It is over, Kieran. The worst is over." Kieran pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her and holding on like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. Molly held him back just as tightly, feeling the adrenaline and fear finally draining away to be replaced with exhausted relief. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other in the quiet house while outside the ranch hands dealt with the grim aftermath of violence. Finally, Kieran pulled back just enough to look down at her. "I thought I might lose you today," he said, his voice rough. "And I realized something. I realized that in the short time I have known you, you have become the most important person in my world. I care about you, Molly, more than I thought possible after such a brief acquaintance." "I care about you too," Molly whispered. "When those bullets started flying, all I could think was that I had to see you again, had to make sure you were safe. You have given me so much, Kieran. Safety, kindness, a reason to keep living when I thought everything worth living for was gone. Then stay. Kieran said suddenly, urgently. When this is all over, when Cole is caught and justice is served, stay here. With me. Not as a guest or someone I am protecting, but as someone who belongs here. With me. Kieran, are you asking me? I am asking you to give us a chance, to see where this goes. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other in some ways, but I also know that what I feel for you is real. I have never felt this way about anyone. You make me want to be better, do more, build a future instead of just existing day to day. Tears filled Molly's eyes, but these were tears of joy, not sadness. Yes, yes, I will stay. I want to see where this goes too. I want to build a future with you. Kieran's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He cupped her face gently and leaned down, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted. But Molly did not want to pull away. She rose on her toes and met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Kieran rested his forehead against hers. When this is truly over, when you have had time to grieve properly and heal, I am going to court you properly. I am going to do this right. I look forward to it, Molly said with a small smile. The next morning they loaded the dead outlaws and their wounded companion into a wagon and rode for Columbia. The trip took most of the day, but they made it to town before dark. The sheriff, a weathered man named Bill Carson, listened to their story with a grim expression. I've been trying to catch Jackson Cole for 2 years, he said when Kieran finished talking. You did good work here, Vaughn. Damn shame you gave up your badge. We could use a man like you. I am happy ranching, Kieran said, glancing at Molly who stood beside him. But I will always help when innocents are threatened. Sheriff Carson organized a posse to track Cole's blood trail, and he assured Molly that they would catch him. A man with a shoulder wound, probably losing blood, cannot have gotten far. We will find him within a few days. They stayed in Columbia that night, Kieran renting 2 rooms at the hotel to preserve Molly's reputation. It felt strange to sleep apart after so many nights with Kieran just down the hall, close enough to call if she needed him. But Molly understood the need for propriety, especially in a small town where gossip spread faster than wildfire. True to Sheriff Carson's word, Cole was found 3 days later, dead from blood loss and infection about 15 miles from Kieran's ranch. His body was brought back to Columbia and buried in the criminal section of the town cemetery. The surviving member of his gang, the wounded man, confessed to multiple murders and robberies in exchange for a recommendation for mercy. He would hang for his crimes, but at least he would not hang wondering if he could have saved himself. With Cole dead, and his gang scattered or arrested, the threat to Molly finally ended. She could breathe freely for the first time since that terrible night when her family had been murdered. But the grief was still there, waiting for quiet moments to crash over her like a wave. Kieran was patient with her tears, holding her when she cried, giving her space when she needed it, talking with her late into the night when the memories became too much. He took her to the site where her family's homestead had been, helped her search through the ruins for anything that might have survived the fire. They found a few things. Her mother's iron skillet, a pocket watch that had belonged to her father, Samuel's collection of interesting rocks. Small things, but precious. They also filed a claim for the gold strike on Molly's behalf. As the sole surviving member of her family, the claim passed to her. It would make her a wealthy woman eventually, though she told Kieran that no amount of gold could replace what she had lost. I know, he said gently. But your father found that gold legally, filed the claim properly. He would want you to benefit from his discovery. It is part of his legacy to you. Molly thought about that and realized Kieran was right. Her father had been so excited about the gold, about the opportunities it would provide for his family. She would honor his memory by accepting that gift, even though it had cost him his life. As fall turned to winter, Molly settled into life on Kieran's ranch. True to his word, he courted her properly. He took her on rides through the beautiful Montana countryside, showed her every inch of his land. He brought her small gifts, a book of poetry he thought she would enjoy, a pretty hair comb he found in the general store, wildflowers picked from the meadow near the creek. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Kieran told her about his dreams for the ranch, his plans to expand the herd, maybe breed horses in addition to cattle. Molly shared her dream of opening a school, and Kieran encouraged her, even offering to help build a schoolhouse on his land if she wanted. Our land, he corrected himself. If you marry me, everything I have becomes yours too. Is that a proposal? Molly asked, her heart skipping a beat. Not yet, Kieran said with a smile. When I propose, you will know it. It will be special, I promise. The proposal came on a crisp December evening, 3 months after Molly had first knocked on Kieran's door. He took her to a spot on the property where you could see for miles in every direction, mountains rising in the distance, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. He had brought blankets and hot cider, and they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I have been thinking about timing, Kieran said as the last light faded from the sky. About how strange life is, how one moment can change everything. 3 months ago, I was living alone, content with my solitary existence, not looking for anything more. Then you knocked on my door and suddenly my whole world shifted. Kieran, let me finish, he said gently. Please, I need to say this. Molly nodded, her heart racing. You came into my life at your darkest moment, and I thought I was just helping someone in need. I thought I was doing the right thing, being a good person. But you were not the only one who needed saving that night, Molly. I needed you too. I needed to be reminded that life is more than just work and survival. I needed to be reminded what it feels like to care about someone, to want to protect them, to want to build a future with them. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. You make me better. You make me want to be better. When I am with you, I feel complete in a way I have never felt before. You are strong and kind and brave and beautiful, and I love you. I love you with everything I am. Tears were streaming down Molly's face now, but these were happy tears. I love you too, she whispered. Kieran reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. This was my mother's wedding ring. My father gave it to me before he died, told me to save it for when I found the right woman. I think he would have loved you, would have been so happy to know his ring was going to someone as special as you. He slid off the blanket and knelt before her in the dirt, holding the ring up. Molly Richardson, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life keeping the promise I made that first night, preventing your tears and making you smile instead? Yes, Molly said through her happy tears. Yes, absolutely yes. Kieran slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Molly felt like she was flying and falling and standing on solid ground all at once. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Columbia, with Sheriff Carson and his wife serving as witnesses, and Tom, Henry, and Sam looking on with big grins. Molly wore a beautiful white dress that Kieran had special ordered from a shop in Helena, and Kieran wore a new suit that made him look even more handsome than usual. As Molly stood beside Kieran and spoke her vows, promising to love and honor him for the rest of her days, she thought about how far she had come. She had lost everything, had run through the darkness with death at her heels, had knocked on a stranger's door with tears streaming down her face and no hope left in her heart. But that stranger had wiped away her tears and promised to prevent more forever. And somehow, miraculously, he had kept that promise. He had given her safety and protection, yes, but more than that, he had given her a reason to live again, a future to look forward to, and a love she had never expected to find. The first years of their marriage were busy and joyful. Kieran expanded his ranch with the money from Molly's gold claim, buying more land and more cattle. Molly used part of the money to build a small schoolhouse on their property, and soon children from neighboring ranches and homesteads were riding in for lessons. She proved to be an excellent teacher, patient and creative, making learning fun while ensuring her students gained valuable skills. Tom, Henry, and Sam continued to work for them, becoming more like family than employees. Tom eventually married a widow from Colombia and brought her to live in an expanded version of the ranch hand's quarters. Henry remained happily single, though he flirted shamelessly with every unmarried woman within 50 miles. Sam met a girl at one of Molly's school recitals and courted her sweetly until she agreed to be his wife. In the spring of 1880, Molly discovered she was pregnant. Kieran was beside himself with joy and worry, constantly fussing over her and making sure she did not overexert herself. Molly found his concern endearing even when it bordered on excessive. Their son was born in December 1880, a healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel Thomas Vaughn, honoring both Molly's murdered brother and the ranch hand who had become such a good friend. The baby was passed around between the ranch hands and neighbors, all of whom declared him the finest baby in the Montana Territory. Watching Kieran hold their son, seeing the wonder and love in his face, made Molly's heart swell with happiness. This man who had saved her life had given her so much more than safety. He had given her a family again, a home, a purpose, and a love that grew stronger with each passing day. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Sarah Rose, and 2 years after that, another son they called James William. Their house filled with noise and laughter and the organized chaos of raising children. Molly's school continued to thrive, and eventually they hired another teacher to help handle the growing number of students. The ranch prospered under Kieran's management. He proved to have a gift for breeding quality cattle, and buyers came from as far as Wyoming and Colorado to purchase his stock. He also started breeding horses like he had talked about, and his horses became known for their strength and intelligence. Through it all, Kieran and Molly remained deeply in love. They still made time for each other, still talked for hours about their dreams and plans, still stole kisses when the children were not looking. On quiet evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch the sunset, Kieran's arm around Molly's shoulders, both of them counting their blessings. Sometimes Molly thought about that terrible night when she had stumbled through the darkness toward the light in Kieran's window. She thought about how close she had come to dying, how easily things could have gone differently. If she had chosen a different direction, if Kieran had not been home, if he had been a different sort of man who might have turned her away, but she did not dwell on the what-ifs. Instead, she focused on what was. A loving husband, beautiful children, a thriving school, good friends, and a life full of purpose and joy. She had survived the worst thing she could imagine, and on the other side of that darkness, she had found a love and happiness beyond anything she could have dreamed. Kieran kept his promise. He prevented her tears by giving her endless reasons to smile instead. And Molly kept her promise to him, loving him with her whole heart for all the days of her life. Years passed in contentment. Young Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books almost as much as his mother did. He would often sit in the schoolhouse even after classes ended, reading everything he could get his hands on. Sarah Rose was lively and adventurous, always climbing trees and racing her horse across the meadow, much to her father's mixed pride and concern. James William was still young, but showed signs of being a perfect blend of his siblings, thoughtful but also playful. As the children grew, Molly and Kieran made sure they knew the story of how their parents met, though they softened some of the darker details for young ears. They wanted their children to understand that from tragedy could come hope, that kindness to strangers could change lives, that love could bloom even in the darkest circumstances. The schoolhouse expanded twice as more families moved into the area, drawn by the territory's promise of land and opportunity. Molly trained several young women to be teachers, passing on her father's belief that education was the key to a better life. Some of her first students grew up to become teachers themselves, spreading learning throughout the territory. Kieran served as an informal lawman when needed, helping Sheriff Carson track down criminals or settling disputes between ranchers. He never officially took up a badge again, preferring his life as a rancher, but his skills and experience made him a valuable ally to law enforcement. The territory was becoming more civilized, though it still had its rough edges and dangers. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kieran took Molly back to the spot where he had proposed. The children stayed with Tom and his wife, giving Kieran and Molly a rare evening alone. They sat on the same blanket, looking out at the same view, though so much had changed in the years since that December evening. "You ever regret it?" Kieran asked quietly. "Staying here with me instead of going somewhere else, starting completely fresh where there were no memories?" Molly looked at him in surprise. "Regret? Kieran Vaughn, I have never regretted a single moment with you. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel anything but grief again. You gave me children and a home and a purpose. How could I possibly regret any of that?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," Kieran said, taking her hand and threading their fingers together the way he had done countless times over the years. "That you do not feel like circumstances forced you into this life instead of choosing it freely." "I chose this," Molly said firmly. "I choose this every single day. I choose you. I always will." Kieran smiled and pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion and tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. Some things, Molly reflected, only got better with time. Their love was one of those things. More years passed in similar happiness. Samuel announced at 16 that he wanted to study law, inspired by the stories of his father's time as a deputy marshal. Kieran and Molly were proud and arranged for him to apprentice with a lawyer in Helena, visiting him often and missing him terribly when he was gone. Sarah Rose surprised everyone by developing a talent for veterinary medicine, learning everything she could about treating sick and injured animals. She worked closely with her father, helping with the ranch's animals and eventually gaining a reputation throughout the territory for her skill. People brought their animals from miles around for her to treat. James William turned out to have his mother's gift for teaching. By the time he was 15, he was already helping in the schoolhouse, showing patience and creativity in working with younger children. Watching their children grow into capable, kind adults filled Kieran and Molly with pride and joy. They had built something lasting, something good, from the ashes of tragedy. On a warm summer evening in 1895, Kieran and Molly celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and extended ranch family. Samuel had married a smart young woman from Helena and given them 2 grandsons. Sarah Rose had married a rancher from a neighboring property and had a daughter. James William was courting a girl from town, and everyone expected an engagement announcement soon. As Molly looked around at all the faces, all the love and laughter filling her home, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She slipped away from the party for a moment, needing air and a moment to collect herself. Kieran found her on the porch, leaning against the railing and looking out at the land they had built their life on. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern in his voice as he came to stand beside her. "I am more than all right," Molly said, smiling at him. "I am wonderful. I was just thinking about that night I showed up on your doorstep, broken and terrified and certain my life was over. And look at us now. Look at everything we have built." Kieran wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her against his side. "We built it together. Everything good in my life started the night you knocked on my door." "You wiped away my tears," Molly said softly, repeating words she had spoken many times over the years. "And promised to prevent more forever," Kieran finished, as he always did. "You kept that promise," Molly said, turning to face him fully. "You have given me 17 years of happiness. You have given me children and grandchildren and a life so full of love that sometimes I can barely believe it is real." "It is real," Kieran assured her, cupping her face in his hands. "And it is ours, for as long as we both live." They stood together on the porch, listening to the sounds of their family celebrating inside, watching the sun set over the Montana mountains they both loved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new adventures. But tonight, they simply stood together, two people who had found each other in the darkest moment and built a lifetime of light. Inside, someone called for them to come back and cut the cake. Kieran took Molly's hand, and together they returned to the celebration, to their family, to the life they had created together. As they walked, Molly thought about how that terrified girl who had knocked on a stranger's door 17 years ago could never have imagined this happy ending. But here it was, real and solid and beautiful. A rancher's promise kept. A woman's tears wiped away and replaced with smiles. A love story written in the wild Montana territory, proof that even in the hardest times, hope could survive and flourish. Years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to the story of Kieran and Molly Vaughn. They grew older together, silver threading through their hair, laugh lines deepening around their eyes. But their love never aged, never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time and trials into something unbreakable. They eventually handed over the day-to-day running of the ranch to James William, who had decided ranching was his true calling after all. Samuel became a successful lawyer in Helena, but visited often with his growing family. Sarah Rose and her husband bought the neighboring ranch and ran it successfully, while she continued her veterinary work. Kieran and Molly moved into a smaller house. They built on the property, close enough to stay involved but far enough to give the younger generation space to make their own way. They spent their days doing the things they loved. Molly still taught occasionally at the school, now run by several of her former students. Kieran still consulted on ranch matters and helped train young horses, but mostly, they simply enjoyed each other's company. They took long rides through the countryside they both loved. They read books together by the fire. They played with their grandchildren and, eventually, great-grandchildren. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the eternal dance of the sun setting behind the mountains. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a massive celebration. The ranch was full of people whose lives had been touched by Kieran and Molly's kindness over the years. Former students who were now teachers, ranchers who had learned their trade from Kieran, families who had been helped through hard times by the Vaughn's generosity. Samuel stood to make a toast. His own children gathered around him. "I want to thank my parents for showing us what real love looks like. for demonstrating every day that commitment means staying together through both the good and the hard times, for building not just a ranch or a school, but a community founded on kindness and integrity. Dad, you kept your promise to Mom that very first night, and you have kept it every day since. And Mom, you have shown us all what strength and grace look like. To Kieran and Molly Vaughn, to Kieran and Molly, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. As the celebration continued around them, Kieran led Molly to a quieter corner. 30 years, he said wonderingly. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know exactly what you mean, Molly said, leaning against his shoulder the way she had done countless times over the decades. Sometimes I still dream about that night, you know. I dream that I am running through the darkness, terrified and alone. But then I always wake up here with you and remember that the nightmare ended 30 years ago. No more nightmares, Kieran said, kissing the top of her head. Not while I am here to chase them away. You are my light in the darkness, Molly said softly. You always have been. From that very first moment when you opened your door and I saw the kindness in your eyes, even before you wiped away my tears, I knew I had found safety. I had found hope. I had found home. And I found my purpose, Kieran replied. Taking care of you, loving you, building a life with you. Everything else, the ranch, the children, all of it, grew from that single moment when you knocked on my door and changed my life forever. They watched their family celebrate, watched children play in the same yard where their own children had played, watched the next generation create memories on land that had been in the Vaughn family for decades and would hopefully remain so for generations to come. As the sun set on their 30th anniversary, painting the Montana sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Kieran and Molly Vaughn stood together, hands clasped, hearts full. They had lived a good life, a full life, a life built on a promise made and kept. The girl who had knocked on a door with tears streaming down her face had found not just shelter, but love. The rancher who had wiped those tears away had found not just a purpose, but a partner. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, something that would echo through generations. And every night, as they had for 30 years, Kieran would hold Molly close and whisper, "I love you. No more tears, not ever." And Molly would whisper back, "I love you too. You kept your promise. You always keep your promise." It was a conversation they never tired of, a promise renewed daily, a love that had started in darkness but had blazed bright for 3 decades and would continue to burn until their last breath and beyond, living on in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. The wild Montana territory that had witnessed so much violence and hardship had also witnessed this. A love story for the ages, a promise kept, a life well lived, and a happily ever after earned through courage, kindness, and commitment. And that truly was forever.